She's back there playing an ancient Chinese guitar song called Tun Ing. Yesterday, I had an opportunity to meet and take a lesson from an incredibly good horseman. His name is Jake Caldwell. And after we spoke for a minute, he remembered me and I didn't necessarily remember him. I knew who he was, but I didn't remember that we knew each other back when we were both walleyed pistol wavers. But I got an opportunity to watch him and take a couple lessons from him, and I learned a bunch. It was really neat. I learned some really practical, mechanical things that I would have figured out on my own anyway. I learned some really interesting things about my tools and how I use them correctly and incorrectly that eventually I would have figured out anyway. But what I found really important about the lesson, and mostly it was from watching him, I learned a thing about myself. And what I learned, and it was something I knew and I've been battling with for a while now, but it was just how defensive I am around a horse. And that defensiveness that I've built up I'm not apologetic for it necessarily, or at all for that matter, because it's kept me alive. I spent so much time around really tough horses, being in the wrong place at the wrong time and having to learn the hard way where the right place at the right time was. That I built this defense just out of survival. Well, that's fine, but I'm really not riding those kind of horses anymore, and it's time for me to do away with that. I've ridden and been around some great horses in my career, great horses, but it was like one great horse that punctuated 19 that were trying to kill me. That's just how my career has worked out. Well, I'm not there anymore. I'm not in that position anymore. I'm riding a lot of some good horses and a lot of just nice horses. And all of the horses I'm around are not trying to kill me. And I'm still super defensive. I'm always on the watch, always trying to be someplace where they're not trying to kill me. And I've just trained myself to be like that. And some of the things that Jake was making me do, to do the exercises and the maneuvers that he wanted me to do, forced me to put myself in a vulnerable position. And that scares me to death. I mean, that is so scary to me, because I've beat it into my own head to never be in a vulnerable position. And even the times when you have to, when your leg goes over the top of your cantle board, when you're stepping on a horse, that's as vulnerable as you get. Well, I counteract it by cheeking them around and making them immobile. Those are situations I just avoid anytime I'm vulnerable. And he made me be vulnerable. And I want to say something about Jake. This should have been in the introduction part about him, but he's one of the unsung horsemen that most of y'all will never hear of. But his groove is on champions on the flat track, quarter mile, thoroughbred horses, cutting horses, reining horses, dressage horses, ranch horses, rescue horses. His groove is so broad and so varied. He's got his groove on so many horses. It's mind-boggling what he's done to the horse world. And he's somebody that you don't hear about if you're a casual horse owner or you're an amateur horse owner. he's somebody that's kind of deep state, I guess, is almost what you would say. But he was forcing me to do the things that he was telling me to do. I was forced to make myself vulnerable and put myself in a vulnerable situation. And I realized while I was doing it, how afraid that made me. And that really opened my eyes to how that affects everything else I do with horses every day. How defensive I am and how that has an effect on horses. And then the next guy has to deal with it. Whoever rides the horse after me now has to deal with this defensive wall that I've put up to try to keep myself safe. And he's got to scratch his head, or she has got to scratch their head and go, why does this horse act like that? Well, it's me. It's my fault. That is my fault. Because I refused to put myself in a vulnerable situation. And so that was the best lesson I learned from Jake. Jake, I doubt you watch this. But if you do, thank you so much. It was such a great lesson, mechanically, biomechanically, and psychologically. It was a great lesson, and I appreciate it. And I hope you all that are watching this will think about the ways that you do that, whether you've been in these traumatic situations like I have and taught yourself to be defensive, or if you're just an amateur and unsure of the way things work, or if you're somewhere in the middle. Just think about that. Think about the damage you're doing to that horse mentally by being that defensive, because he doesn't mean anything against you. Even those bad ones I was around, they didn't mean anything against me. They were just working for themselves. So keep it in mind and try to look at it from their point of view.